right, so friendly reminder, tomorrow we are doing 3 primaries. We are not taking a test. Monday, I am lecturing on week 9. Tuesday, I'm lecturing on week 9. Wednesday, you have the PSATs. Thursday, you are taking an individual test, and that is going to be the last grade of the quarter. If you didn't take a look at your focus, you will notice it's a little bit different than in previous. I'm kind of excited, but we live in 2022, but so here's that. What's up, Riley? No, there is no vocab quizzes next week. We are taking a break on vocab. It's the end of the quarter. I'm just trying to rein it all in because when we start week 10, I got 3 weeks to finish content, and then we have a writing week, and then we're in APGov. So I gotta tie some things through, so I just thought everyone could use a little break. Is that all right with you? Grant?
Should I have put my name on the bag of donations?
No, because I write down people's names on a running list. Okay. Your focus for this week. So one of the very, very few and respected websites on whether you're a conservative or a liberal is called Pew Research. It is one of the most, if not one of the 3 only websites that play right down the middle, and that's the website we're dealing with. You're going to go to the link in which I provided on there, and you are going to complete a survey about what political party your beliefs align with. Isn't that fun? Yeah. Now, please note, it'll take you less than 3 minutes to take the survey. And then this is just the information about it. I am not collecting this information for my own use. I don't particularly care about what political party you are a part of, but apparently there are 13 here in the United States. Different factions of the 2 major parties, and then complete outside the 2-party system parties, and that's what they are. There's about 15 questions. You just check the one you believe in, and then it correlates all that data and spits out an answer. I did this, of course, because I can't have you do something if I haven't done it. I did it. Took me less than 3 minutes to take the survey because I timed it. And then I got a response, and I was like, no, I'm not. And then I read the answers, and I was like, shit, I am. So I actually learned a little bit about myself and my own political ideas. Turns out I'm incredibly average. Yes, I am. I'm average in height, average in everything. So here we go. So I will warn you, there are 2 questions that ask questions about gay and transgender rights, because that is a topic of 2022. It's a major aspect of political viewpoints, and it just asks you 2 questions about it, not about your personal, but in general. If you are uncomfortable answering questions about these types of things, or don't feel comfortable taking or doing this survey, which is literally 2 controversial-ish questions, please come see me, and I will give you an alternative assignment that will take about the same amount of time. Is everyone clear on that? So, it is done by Pew Research, which is one of the most down-the-line websites. It is data-based. It is one of the highest regarded websites on the internet. It's funded by a think tank. They are running it, not Samantha Bennett. I personally don't care which one you are. But I do think it's interesting because the next 4 weeks, all we're dealing with are political parties. So it'd be kind of interesting just for you to know where you fall, and for no other reason. Sounds good? Are we excited about a survey? Isn't it better than looking at the book?
Yes.
Yeah. So it literally should take you less than 10 minutes. Like, literally. And honestly, I had a kid take it last period and thought it was really interesting. So, there you go. So, if you feel uncomfortable answering questions about your political leanings, feel free to come at me, and I will happily change an assignment and come up with an alternative assignment that will take you about the same amount of time. Sounds good? Perfect. So, that is that. We are clear on that? Perfect. Let's continue our exploration of the Supreme Court and the judicial branch. I know. Lots of things happened yesterday with the Supreme Court. They are very active. Remember, they started their sessions on Monday. They've already rejected 30 cases of their 200 applied cases. They rejected 30 of them in 3 days. That's pretty impressive. Can we agree? Yeah, some of them are high profile, some of them are not high profile, but they're working. Anyway, okay. Where did we leave off, Sydney?
We finished last slide.
We finished this slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so U.S. Supreme Court. We talked about appellate jurisdiction. Perfect. You do need to just draw down this chart. You will see it or could see it on your AP exam. Okay? So, the Supreme Court or appellate jurisdiction. Appellate is essentially appeals. Okay? So, you're copying down the chart. Yeah, Alex. Okay? So, what happens is you and I have some sort of criminal, the government accuses us of breaking a state law. We go to state trial courts or district courts. Okay, we get a verdict. We think that our lawyer failed us. Okay, so what happens is we go to an intermediate appellate court or the first court of appeals. We submit it. Once it goes to there, it goes to the state Supreme Court. Okay, and then it goes to the United States Supreme Court. Or it goes from the United States District Courts to the United States Circuit Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. I'm telling you right now, most of them go from the United States District Courts to Supreme Court, to Circuit Court of Appeals, then to the Supreme Court. You okay today?
Yeah.
Do you mean that? You look like you are struggling today.
Oh, I've done it for you.
Okay. You just look miserable.
I got a 10 on the 10 on the vocab.
I'm very proud. Very proud. Okay, so when we're talking about it, it is all about whether the rule of law has been applied correctly. So if you had a terrible lawyer who failed to represent you correctly, can you file for an appeal? Absolutely, and that's actually one of the most common ones is lawyer error. That their lawyer was insufficient, and because of that, they lost their they lost their hearing, which is why they're appealing. Is one of the largest complaints. So this is the Supreme Court. This is how you get there. It is not. This is obviously the overly simplistic version. You don't just go to the United States District Courts. It typically takes multiple courts to get there, but this is the typical major route of getting there. Are we good? Did we talk about checks on the Supreme Court yesterday? Okay. Listen to me. Look at me, look at me, look at me. On this one thing with 7 questions on your test. Yeah, these are like the big things. This is like the big things you have to know for AP. You need all of this information down. Yes? Okay, so write it down, and I'm going to go through it. So, checks on the Supreme Court. Remember, our government runs on 3 branches. No one branch is supposed to be completely dominating the other 2. However, one branch is supposed to be more powerful and is designed to be more powerful. What is that branch? Legislative. And David, why is the legislative branch supposed to be more powerful than the other 2? Yes, it's all representative, 100%. We vote for those people, which is why they're given more power. Okay? Now, the executive branch was constitutionally created to have more authority than the judicial branch. The judicial branch is the weakest of the 3 branches in accordance to the Constitution and the powers the Constitution gives it. However, as we know in 2022, is the judicial branch weak? No. Okay, it has now come up to equality of the executive branch. Now, no matter your opinions on Biden, how often does Biden directly affect your everyday living? A lot? How does Biden affect your everyday living?
Okay.
Yeah, he rarely touches. The president, whether it's Obama, Trump, Biden, rarely touches our everyday life. Okay? Now, if you're referring to the gas price problem, the gas price problem's OPEC. The president has very little to do with it. Like little to nothing. When it was Trump and he was in office and gas prices were really low, it wasn't because Trump did anything. It's because OPEC was trying to bankrupt Venezuela. Well, guess what OPEC did? Bankrupt Venezuela, and as soon as they bankrupt Venezuela, they bought up all the oil refineries, and then they jacked up the price.
That's not nice.
No, it's not nice, but that's what they did. And that's how OPEC controls all of the world oil.
They just can do that?
Yeah. Yeah, they control the largest reserves of oil in the world, and all of the society runs on oil. So yeah, they get to call the shots. Now, does the president have a little bit of control on oil? Yes, we have reserves that he has already opened up and has opened up even more reserves. By the way, the Saudis are cutting back oil production by 2 million barrels a day. So what's going to happen? Prices have already gone up for gas.
Why did they cut it?
Because they can make more money.
That's just kind of money.
They cut production so they can jack up prices. It's smart for them, bad for everyone else. So when people are like, oh, it's Biden's fault. Well, no, it's not Biden's fault. It's also not Trump's, business success that prices were low during his administration, because presidents don't have an influence on that. Now, there are things presidents can do. They have small impacts, but they do have impacts. But it's not Biden who has that impact. So going back to the original thing, presidents have very little impact on our daily life, but they do have an over presence. Same thing with the Supreme Court. That has become even more clear as of later. So, checks on the Supreme Court, because everything is a check. Congress can influence the federal judiciary by changing the jurisdiction. Underneath that one, I know you've already moved on to the next one, put a big star and say Congress can add more courts. For the first one, it says Congress can influence the federal judiciary by changing the appellate jurisdiction. Put a star and write Congress can add more courts and dilute power. Write it down. That's what that means. Okay? The first time Congress really does this is with John Adams into Jefferson with Marbury versus Madison, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Okay, the next check on powers, the executive branch and the legislative branch can decide to avoid or ignore unpopular Supreme Court decisions. Isn't that wild? I literally learned that this week. Like, how can they just ignore it? But they both have to be in unison. How often is our legislative branch and our executive branch on the same team? Not often. So, how often does that happen? Even more infrequently, because how often does Supreme Court cases issue something that's incredibly unpopular? Not that often. So, it has happened. I think it's happened 3 or 4 times. Do not ask me what they are, because I don't have an example for you. Now, the reason why they can do this is because the Supreme Court cannot enforce anything. They can just say it's constitutional or not, but they can't do anything about it. Because who's in charge of enforcing the laws? The executive branch. Who's in charge of creating the laws? The legislative branch. The Supreme Court honestly has no power unless the executive branch and the legislative branch give it power. So I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know they really kind of had a choice. Anyway, so your third thing, the president can use partisan politics to place a Supreme Court judge. Ladies and gentlemen, in your lifetime of even the last 8 years, you've seen 5 Supreme Court judges be placed. Do you know how wild that is? And they've been some of the most controversial appointments in history, which is even more wild. Whatever team you're on, conservative or liberal, I think we can all hope that the next appointment is significantly less dramatic, yes? What do you got, Alex?
What does it mean to place?
Oh, so for instance, RBG died, yes? Okay, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's like a feminist icon. She's the one who argued for Title IX and women's rights, which is why I get paid equal, all that stuff. Okay, with that being said, when she died, Trump was in the presidency. He got a list of 16 people compiled by people who know things, of 16 judges, and of those 16, he got told-ish, picked-ish, which one would be the best fit for the court. So he, as president, got to pick or appoint a justice. Then that justice went in front of the Senate to be confirmed for the position.
Alright.
Okay? So, appointed is what a president does. They literally pick them and say, I want you to be the next justice. Then that appointee goes in front of Senate and argues. One of the most famous ones of late is Kavanaugh. I don't know if you saw those hearings. The Kavanaugh hearings, he sat in front and talked about how in high school he drank a lot of beer and he really liked beer. I like beer. Okay, it only happened a couple years ago. They had like a bunch of SNL skits on it. Like, it was kind of a touch point. No? We don't know the Kavanaugh hearings? Anyway. With that being said, him sitting there and answering questions about his past, his beliefs, the law, his experience of being a judge, that's what they do in the hearings, and then Senate votes, and if he gets it, then he has a lifetime appointment, which of course Kavanaugh did. Now, the president can use partisan politics, which means if it's a Republican president, he's going to put a Republican. If it's a Democratic president, he's going to put Democrat. That's partisan politics by party lines. Okay? Even though judges are not supposed to be political, they all have leanings of liberal or conservative. They're supposed to serve the law, not the politics, which is the biggest criticism we have of the Supreme Court today, which is why it has an approval of 22%. Right, Jordan? What do you got, Desmond?
If a Supreme Court member goes to jail or prison,
That would be just the craziest scandal in the history of the world.
It would be wacky, yeah, but like.
Wacky. Wacky. Did you just say wacky?
Wacky.
How often do you use the word
I use
wacky?
wacky a lot. I use wacky and odd.
Odd? Odd I get. Wacky? Okay.
Anyways, if they go.
I got distracted by wacky.
If they go to prison, which would be wacky, would they still keep their position?
I doubt it. If you break the law, I'm pretty sure you get disbarred.
Okay, but like, it's for life.
Yeah, but you also can't just like do shitty things and not be impeached. I think you can be impeached.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can be impeached. I'm pretty sure you can be impeached. No one's been impeached, but you can. Yeah, you can be impeached. What do you got?
What if they like get really sick, go to the hospital, and like
They're
they
supposed
pronounce dead, and then they like come back to life,
What?
Because it was for life.
yeah.
They died.
But then they're back to life.
Like their heart flatline, and then like.
I can't, Riley. I can't. I literally can't. Unless they issue the memo of death, then I think they're fine.
How much do they make?
They don't really make them up. Okay, keep in mind, quintessential. Someone Googled it in my fourth period because someone asked me that. They make like $250, between $250 and $350, which is a lot of money. Coming from someone who makes $50,000 a year, yeah, that's a lot of money. But it really isn't that much money in the grand scheme of things. They make most of their money off of speaking engagements. So colleges, universities, think tanks and stuff pay them a lot of money. PACs pay the biggest amount of money for them to go speak at their conferences and meetings and stuff like that. And that's how they make money, is doing that type of stuff. Okay, so the Senate Judiciary Committee are the ones that do the hearings. That's where they have Senate members ask questions before the Senate votes. The Supreme Court tries to avoid deciding conflicts between Congress and the president because there's no winning. Can we agree? Okay, so they try to avoid those types of things. The Supreme Court finds a federal law unconstitutional. Congress can go ahead and change the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, how many times has the Constitution been amended? 27 times in 200 and something years. So how often is Congress going to amend the Constitution? Not very often. So it is a check on the power of the Supreme Court, but it is not used often. Voters cannot oust federal judges. They can only be impeached. But we can oust district judges and low-level state judges. That's why we voted for judges. I saw Judge Tibbles everywhere. Did you see the signs a couple weeks ago? Yeah, for the primaries. They get appointed and then they have to be reelected because they're in the district courthouses. Does that make sense? Okay. Once you get to the federal level, you're there and promoted on the wills of the president. What do you got?
What's oust?
Oust means you get voted out. Okay. Federalist 78. Write it nice and big because it's one of your major primaries. We are doing this tomorrow. It is written by Hamilton. It says that the judicial branch is the weakest and it's done on purpose. Okay? You need to know that the Supreme Court depends on the executive branch for enforcement. Because the Supreme Court can't do anything. They can simply say it's constitutional or not. It's the other two branches that make it real. So, if the other two branches ignore it, the Supreme Court's power is done. If the other two branches make it real, then it has a huge impact. Someone asked me, well, why doesn't the executive branch and the legislative branch, if everyone's unhappy, not everyone, but if there's a lot of people unhappy about Roe versus Wade, why don't they just ignore it? Does our Congress in 2022 look like they're about to make a cohesive decision? Hell no. That is completely divided and fragmenting and is a huge deal, which is why there's no way the legislative branch is going to ignore it, and Biden isn't going to ignore it either because it's drumming up good votes. Caesar. Now, you do need to know that the legislative branch balances out the Supreme Court. Because as much authority as these 9 people wield, the legislative branch can undo everything as long as they have a severe majority. Now, the biggest thing is that Hamilton writes, which we'll talk about tomorrow, is the independence of these justices. That the reason they get lifetime appointments is so they don't have to play the political re-election game. If every 10 years you had to get re-elected, every 10 years you're going to sell your soul so you can get re-elected. And all of a sudden you care more about the politics than you do about the law. So Hamilton makes the argument that this should be life appointments. But I think we can all agree having life appointments means every single one on the justices, all 9 of them, that we're stuck with them until they die or retire. So conservatives hated RBG because she survived and lived till she was 90 or 89 or 90. That's a long time. She got appointed in the 70s. So she was on there for a very long time. Same thing with the conservatives. Kavanaugh, if you hate Kavanaugh as a conservative justice, he's going to be with us for 30 plus years. And that's the problem that some people have about it, is yes, they have the life appointment, but then we're stuck with these people for an unbeknownst amount of time. What do you got? Marbury versus Madison, right down.
What if someone gets appointed but doesn't want to, like...
No. You don't get put in that list of 16 and not want it. To be on the list, the short list of a justice of the Supreme Court is something that those justices have dreamed about since younger than you. That they've wanted to be on the Supreme Court, and every decision they've all made every single day was to get into Harvard, Yale, Brown, and go to Harvard Law, and go and work for the Court of Appeals, work for a justice at the Supreme Court, go back to law school and teach, and then hopefully have your name in the pile. This is what they live dream about. It's their whole goal, is to be a justice. Well, think about it. There's only been 170 of them or something. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, okay, Marbury versus Madison is the second major document or court case. I've already taught you Marbury versus Madison. This is the one between Jefferson and Adams. Adams got voted out, so we packed the courts, yes, created a bunch of courts, put a bunch of judges on there. Jefferson came into power and he's like, screw you, Adams, I'm not doing this and I'm not paying these people, so the judges sued to get paid, yes. And while they were sitting there looking at this law that Adams passed literally to piss off Jefferson, the court ruled that the law was unconstitutional and created judicial review. Write that down. You need judicial review. The biggest thing about Marbury versus Madison is the creation of judicial review, which means that the Supreme Court can rule a law unconstitutional. Okay? That's the big point. Marbury versus Madison is what gives the Supreme Court power. This is what begins rising its stock. Remember, it was the weakest of the three branches, and it has now risen to equality of the executive branch because of judicial review and Marbury versus Madison. Okay? Perfect. Okay. Now this is not as updated as it needs to be. That's Chief Justice. Now inside the Supreme Court is your next heading, right? Inside the Supreme Court. Inside the Supreme Court, there are 9 justices. Of one of the 9, one of them is called the Chief Justice. The current Chief Justice, or like the team captain. Someone was like a captain? Sure. He's the team captain. And I say he because it's always been a... Yeah. We've only had 6 women on the Supreme Court. We have 4 right now. Yeah. See ya.